Welcome to Sleep Bible Stories, where even the tired soul can finally rest. Maybe today did not go the way you hoped. Maybe you feel exhausted, discouraged, or quietly disappointed in yourself. But tonight, remember this: failure is not the end of your story. Sometimes it is the place where God begins rebuilding you. The world may remind you of every mistake, every delay, every weakness. But God does not look at you the way fear does. The same God who carried David through fear, who restored Peter after failure, and who never abandoned Jonah in the storm, is still watching over you tonight. So let your breathing slow down. Release the weight you carried all day, and allow your mind to finally rest. Because tonight is not about perfection. Tonight is about peace. Close your eyes. Get comfortable. In Book of Proverbs 24:16, God says, "For though the righteous fall 7 times, they rise again." That verse is not saying righteous people never fail. There are moments in life when you will feel weak, tired, disappointed in yourself, confused about your future, or ashamed of mistakes you made. Sometimes you may feel like you failed as a parent, failed in relationships, failed financially, failed spiritually, or failed the version of yourself you were trying to become. And in those moments, the enemy wants you to believe your fall is permanent. He wants you to believe that because you stumbled, you are finished. But God never said righteous people would never fall. He said they rise again. That means even good people struggle. Even faithful people break down sometimes. Even strong people cry in silence. Even people who pray, people who believe, people who love God, still face moments where life knocks them to the ground. But the difference is not perfection. The difference is persistence. The righteous rise again. There are people right now carrying guilt from years ago, replaying old mistakes in their mind every single night. Some people are still punishing themselves for things God already forgave. One divorce, one addiction, one betrayal, one failure, one lost opportunity, or one wrong decision. But God is reminding you tonight that your story does not end where you fell. You can still rise. You can still rebuild. You can still become wiser, stronger, calmer, more disciplined, more compassionate, more focused, and more spiritually grounded than before. Sometimes failure becomes the very thing that shapes your character. Failure teaches humility. Failure teaches patience. Failure teaches wisdom. Failure teaches you how fragile life can be and how much you truly need God. There are lessons success can never teach. Sometimes God allows difficult seasons because He is preparing your spirit for something greater than your comfort zone. And while you are hurting, while you are confused, while you are waiting, He is still working quietly inside of you. A seed looks buried before it grows, and many people think their life is over simply because they are in a season underground. But God is not finished with you. You may feel emotionally exhausted. You may feel mentally drained. You may feel like you have tried over and over again and nothing changes. But listen carefully. As long as you are still breathing, God is still giving you another opportunity to rise again. Do not let one season define your entire future. Do not let embarrassment stop your growth. Do not let fear stop your progress. Do not let failure become your identity. You are more than the worst moment of your life. Sometimes the strongest people are not the people who never fell. They are the people who kept getting back up after everyone thought they would quit. Life will test you. People will disappoint you. Plans will fail. Doors will close. Some days your motivation will disappear. Some nights you will lie awake wondering if things will ever get better. But even then, get back up again. Pray again. Hope again. Try again. Believe again. One of the biggest mistakes people make is assuming growth happens instantly. But growth is often slow, quiet, and uncomfortable. Sometimes you are healing without even realizing it. Sometimes God is rebuilding your mind while you are frustrated that your situation has not changed yet. Healing takes time. Discipline takes time. Forgiveness takes time. Becoming stronger takes time. And God understands that. You do not have to become perfect overnight. You just have to keep rising. Even if it is slowly, even if today all you did was survive, even if all you could do was take one small step forward, that still matters. There are people who gave up because they believed their failures disqualified them. But throughout the Bible, God used imperfect people constantly. People who doubted, people who ran away, people who made terrible mistakes, people who felt weak and unqualified. Yet God still called them, still loved them, and still used them. Because God looks beyond your fall. He sees who you can become if you keep getting back up. And maybe tonight, that is exactly what your soul needs to hear. Not condemnation, not shame, not reminders of every mistake, but hope. Because hopelessness can quietly destroy a person from the inside. When people stop believing tomorrow can be better, they stop trying. But Proverbs reminds us that righteous people rise again, again, and again. Seven times represents repeated struggle, repeated setbacks, repeated moments where life knocks you down, yet they still rise. That means resilience matters to God. Consistency matters to God. Faithfulness matters to God. And even if you feel weak right now, you are not defeated unless you decide to stay down forever. The fact that your heart still desires peace, growth, healing, purpose, and closeness with God means something inside of you is still alive. Protect that. Feed that. Do not let bitterness poison it. Do not let comparison destroy it. Everyone's journey is different. Some people rise quickly. Others rise slowly. But what matters is that you continue moving forward. Even a wounded person can still walk. Even a tired person can still pray. Even a broken heart can still heal. And one day, you may look back at the season that almost destroyed you and realize it was the season that transformed you. The waiting taught you faith. The falling taught you how to rise stronger. So tonight, do not be ashamed of your process. Do not hate yourself because you are still learning. Do not give up because progress feels slow. And do not believe the lie that your mistakes are greater than God's mercy. They are not. God still sees value in you, even after the fall, especially after the fall. Because sometimes broken people become the most compassionate, the most understanding, the most spiritually mature, and the most powerful examples of grace. So breathe deeply tonight. Release the weight of needing to be perfect. Release the fear that you ruined everything forever. And remember these words again. In Proverbs 24:16, God says, "For though the righteous fall 7 times, they rise again." What is failure? Many people think failure means the end. They think failure means they are not good enough, not smart enough, not worthy enough, or too broken for God to use. The world often teaches people that if you fall behind, lose something, make mistakes, or go through difficult seasons, then somehow your value decreases. But in God's eyes, failure is not always what people think it is. Failure, in God's context, is not simply falling down. Failure is refusing to get back up. Failure is losing hope completely. Failure is allowing pain, fear, pride, bitterness, or shame to pull you so far away from God that you stop believing He can still work through your life. Because throughout the Bible, God constantly used imperfect people, people who doubted, people who struggled, people who made terrible mistakes. Yet God still called them, guided them, forgave them, and transformed them. Sometimes people fail at relationships. Sometimes they fail financially. Sometimes they fail spiritually and feel distant from God. Sometimes they fail privately in ways nobody else can see. And those moments can feel heavy. They can make a person feel embarrassed, hopeless, and emotionally exhausted. But one failure does not define your entire identity. One season does not decide your entire future. God sees beyond your worst moment. He sees the heart that is still trying, still learning, still seeking Him even while struggling. Failure can actually become a place of growth. It can humble a person. It can teach wisdom, patience, compassion, endurance, and dependence on God. Many people become stronger because of what they survived. Sometimes the greatest spiritual growth happens during seasons where everything feels uncertain. God can use painful experiences to shape your character in ways comfort never could. And maybe tonight you need to understand this clearly. God is not waiting for you to become perfect before He loves you. He is not standing over your life, counting every mistake with anger. He understands human weakness. He understands fear. He understands discouragement. That is why His mercy exists. That is why grace exists. So if you feel like you failed in life, do not stay trapped in shame. Learn from your mistakes, but do not let them destroy your identity. Bring your pain to God honestly. Pray even when you feel weak. Keep moving forward even if your progress feels slow. A small step forward still matters. Healing still matters. Trying again still matters. Some people think successful people never struggle, but many strong people are simply people who refuse to quit during difficult seasons. They cried, they doubted, they fell. They questioned themselves, but they kept getting back up. And that persistence matters deeply to God. So ask yourself tonight, what if failure is not the end of your story? What if this difficult season is preparing you, teaching you, strengthening you, and bringing you closer to the person God is shaping you to become? Sometimes the pain that almost breaks you becomes the very thing that transforms you. Do not let failure convince you that your future is gone. Do not let shame silence your purpose. And do not believe the lie that God cannot still use your life. As long as you are breathing, there is still purpose ahead of you. There is still growth ahead of you. And there is still another opportunity to rise again. Before Jesus was arrested, Peter was confident. Very confident. He truly believed that no matter what happened, he would never leave Jesus. While others may become afraid, while others may run away, and because of that closeness, Peter believed his loyalty would never break under pressure. But sometimes people do not truly understand how fragile they are until life places them under fear, pressure, exhaustion, confusion, or pain. It is easy to feel strong during peaceful moments. It is easy to make promises when life is calm. But fear has a way of exposing the weakness hidden inside the human heart. And that is exactly what happened to Peter. Before it all happened, Jesus warned Peter. Jesus already knew what was coming. He told Peter that before the rooster crowed, Peter would deny him 3 times. But Peter could not imagine himself doing such a thing. In his mind, he would never deny Jesus, never walk away, never fail him. Yet that moment teaches something very deep about human nature. Sometimes people sincerely mean the promises they make, but when fear enters the situation, emotions change, courage disappears. Then the moment came, Jesus was arrested. Fear spread among the disciples. Suddenly, this was no longer a peaceful moment walking beside Jesus. Now danger felt real. Peter watched Jesus being taken away. He watched the crowd become hostile. He watched the atmosphere turn dangerous and frightening. And slowly, fear began growing inside of him. Then someone recognized Peter and asked if he knew Jesus. In that moment, Peter had a choice, and out of fear, he denied him. Maybe Peter's heart started racing. Whatever was happening inside of him, fear became louder than courage. Peter said he did not know Jesus. Again, Peter denied Jesus. Then a third time, Peter denied even knowing the man he loved and followed. Think about how painful that moment must have been for Peter. This was not a stranger he denied. The same Jesus who showed him love, wisdom, patience, miracles, and grace. Peter probably never imagined he would fail in such a painful way. Yet in one night, fear overcame him. And then the rooster crowed. That sound must have pierced Peter's heart deeply, because suddenly he remembered the words Jesus had spoken earlier. Suddenly, the reality of what he had done crashed down on him all at once. The Bible says Peter went away and cried bitterly. Those were not small tears. This was deep sorrow, deep shame, deep regret. Peter understood that he failed in the very moment he believed he would be strongest. Sometimes people fail in areas where they believed they would never fail. Sometimes people disappoint themselves. Sometimes they break promises they truly meant to keep. Sometimes fear causes people to make choices they later regret deeply. Sometimes exhaustion, pressure, temptation, insecurity, or pain pushes people into moments they never imagined happening. A feeling that maybe they ruined everything forever. Peter probably thought he failed Jesus completely. He probably felt broken emotionally. Maybe he felt embarrassed and spiritually crushed. Some people believe their failures disqualified them from purpose, peace, joy, or closeness with God. But Peter's story did not end with failure, and that is one of the most beautiful parts of the Bible. After Jesus rose again, he came back for Peter. Think about that carefully. Jesus knew Peter would fail before it even happened. Yet Jesus still loved him, still chose him, still cared for him. They imagined God standing far away in anger, waiting to reject imperfect people. But throughout the Bible, God continuously restores broken people who are willing to return to Him honestly. When Jesus spoke with Peter again, He gave him purpose again. He reminded Peter that failure was not stronger than grace. Imagine the healing Peter must have felt hearing Jesus speak to him with love instead of condemnation. Imagine the relief Peter must have felt realizing that his worst moment was not the end of his story. And maybe tonight, someone needs to hear that too. Your failure is not greater than God's mercy. Your mistakes are not stronger than His grace. There are people listening tonight who feel like they ruined opportunities forever. People who feel ashamed of their past. People who carry regret quietly in their hearts. Some people are angry at themselves because they failed spiritually, or simply as human beings. Sometimes failure becomes the very thing that humbles you enough to grow. Before failure, Peter was confident in himself. After failure, it taught him dependence on God instead of dependence on his own strength. Sometimes people become wiser after they break. Sometimes people become spiritually stronger after seasons of weakness. And later, the man who once hid in fear became a man filled with boldness and spiritual strength. That transformation did not happen because Peter was perfect. That is the powerful side of failure in the Bible. Failure humbled Peter. Failure changed Peter. Failure strengthened Peter. And maybe your painful season can do the same for you. Sometimes the painful seasons of life do not make sense while we are living through them. Sometimes life turns in directions we never expected. And in those moments, people often ask themselves why God allowed certain things to happen. Why the heartbreak happened. Why the rejection happened. Why the suffering happened. Why the failure happened. Why certain prayers seemed unanswered. Why life suddenly became heavy. And during those painful seasons, it can feel difficult to understand what God is doing behind the scenes. Pain has a way of making people feel confused, emotionally exhausted, and spiritually drained. Some people begin questioning their purpose. Others begin questioning themselves. And some quietly wonder if God has forgotten about them completely. But in Book of Genesis 50 to 20, Joseph says, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good." Those words came from a man who understood pain deeply. Joseph was betrayed by his own brothers. The very people who should have protected him turned against him. They became jealous of him, angry at him, and eventually sold him into slavery. Imagine how painful it must have felt. Imagine the confusion, the heartbreak, the loneliness. Joseph probably never imagined his own family would treat him that way. The people closest to him became the source of his suffering. And sometimes that is one of the deepest kinds of pain a person can experience. Pain that comes from people they love and trusted. And yet, Joseph's suffering did not stop there. He was taken far away from home into a foreign land where everything around him was unfamiliar. Later, after trying to do the right thing, Joseph was falsely accused and thrown into prison, even though he had done nothing wrong. Think about that carefully. Joseph tried to remain faithful and still suffered. He obeyed God and still faced pain. He tried to live with integrity, and life still became unfair. And that alone teaches something powerful, because many people believe that if they follow God, life will suddenly become easy. But the Bible never promises a life without struggle. Sometimes even faithful people walk through dark seasons. Sometimes even good people experience heartbreak, rejection, waiting, loneliness, disappointment, and suffering. Joseph experienced betrayal, injustice, loneliness, waiting, disappointment, and emotional pain. There were probably moments where he questioned everything. Moments where he wondered why God allowed certain things to happen. Moments where he felt forgotten. Moments where life seemed unfair and confusing. And many people listening tonight understand those feelings very well. Some people know what it feels like to cry quietly at night while carrying pain nobody else sees. Some know what it feels like to be betrayed by people they love deeply. Some know what it feels like to be rejected, lied about, abandoned, misunderstood, or treated unfairly. Some people try their best and still walk through difficult seasons anyway. And when life becomes painful for long periods of time, people can slowly become discouraged inside. But Joseph's story reminds us that God can still work even through painful situations. What others meant for harm, God can still turn into something meaningful. That does not mean pain suddenly feels good. Betrayal still hurts. Rejection still hurts. Loss still hurts. Waiting still hurts. But God has a way of bringing purpose even out of broken situations. Sometimes the very season that almost destroys a person becomes the season that transforms them. Sometimes pain develops wisdom. Sometimes hardship develops endurance. Sometimes disappointment deepens faith. And sometimes suffering changes a person in ways comfort never could. Joseph eventually rose from prison to a position of great authority. The same man who was once betrayed and forgotten became someone God used to save many lives during a famine. And later, he understood something deeper about God's plan. What people intended for evil, God was still able to use for good. That is one of the hardest truths for people to understand while suffering, because when someone is hurting, it is difficult to see purpose in the pain. It is difficult to imagine anything meaningful coming from heartbreak or disappointment, but many times, God is working quietly behind the scenes in ways people cannot yet understand. Sometimes suffering builds wisdom inside a person. Sometimes hardship builds endurance. Sometimes rejection redirects people toward a greater purpose they could not yet see. Sometimes waiting builds patience and spiritual maturity. And sometimes painful experiences make people more compassionate toward others who are hurting. Joseph's pain was real, but his pain did not have the final word. His betrayal was real, But betrayal did not destroy God's purpose for his life. His suffering was real, but suffering did not stop God from working. And maybe tonight, maybe people hurt you deeply. Maybe doors closed unexpectedly. Maybe you feel emotionally exhausted from carrying disappointment for so long. Maybe you have been asking God questions that still feel unanswered. But Joseph's story is a reminder that God is still able to bring light into dark situations. People may fail you. Life may wound you. Seasons may break your heart. But God can still bring purpose out of pain. He can still heal what feels broken. He can still restore peace slowly. And he can still use your story for something meaningful one day. So do not let bitterness completely take over your heart. Do not let painful experiences destroy your ability to hope again. Because sometimes the chapters people wanted to use to destroy you become the very chapters God uses to strengthen you. And one day, you may look back at a season that once confused you and realize God was quietly shaping your life the entire time. When you feel trapped inside a difficult season, when your mind keeps replaying old mistakes, old pain, old failures, old disappointments, some people become trapped emotionally in moments that already passed years ago. They continue carrying shame from things God already forgave. They continue reliving conversations they wish they could change, decisions they regret, opportunities they lost, or seasons where life completely broke them inside. And slowly, the weight of the past begins stealing their peace in the present. But in Epistle to the Philippians 3:13-14, the Apostle Paul says, "Forgetting what is behind and straining toward what is ahead." Those words carry deep meaning because Paul understood what it felt like to have a painful past before becoming one of the most influential voices in the Bible. Paul himself had once lived very differently. He carried regret. He carried memories of the things he had done wrong. Yet Paul understood something powerful. If a person stays trapped in the past forever, they can never fully walk into the future God has prepared for them. Many people think moving forward means pretending pain never happened, but that is not what Paul meant. Forgetting what is behind does not mean erasing memories completely. It means refusing to let the past control your identity, your hope, your peace, or your future any longer. It means refusing to stay spiritually chained to moments that God is already trying to heal you from. Because some people spend so much time looking backward, they lose the strength to keep moving forward. And maybe tonight there are people carrying emotional weight they were never meant to carry forever. Some people are carrying guilt. Some are carrying bitterness. Some are carrying shame from failures nobody else even knows about. And over time, those burdens can quietly exhaust the soul. The mind becomes tired. The heart becomes heavy. Hope slowly becomes weaker. And people begin believing that because they failed before, they will never rise again. But Paul reminds us to keep straining toward what is ahead. Faith takes effort. Sometimes people must keep walking forward while still carrying pain inside. Sometimes progress feels slow. Sometimes healing happens quietly, little by little. But God never asks people to become perfect overnight. He simply asks them not to give up. There are seasons where life feels stuck. God is still working quietly in ways that may not yet be visible. Sometimes the hardest seasons become the seasons that shape a person's character the most deeply. Sometimes the pain that almost destroys a person becomes the very thing that teaches wisdom, humility, compassion, endurance, and dependence on God. Paul's words are a reminder that your future still matters. Your story is not finished simply because you experienced failure, heartbreak, disappointment, or struggle. God can still bring peace after pain. He can still restore purpose after confusion. He can still bring growth after brokenness. But part of healing requires releasing the belief that your worst moment defines your entire life forever. So tonight, do not stay trapped in the prison of your past. Learn from it, grow from it, but do not live there forever. God still has purpose ahead of you. There is still healing ahead of you. There is still growth ahead of you. There is still peace ahead of you. And even if moving forward feels difficult right now, keep walking slowly. Keep praying. Keep hoping. Keep believing that God is still able to guide your life forward, one step at a time. Because sometimes the strongest people are not the people who never struggled. They are the people who kept moving forward, even while carrying scars from the past. But in 2 Corinthians 12-9, God says, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." The world teaches people to appear strong, confident, and in control at all times. They believe weakness makes them less valuable, less important, or less worthy. Not because weakness itself is good, but because weakness reminds people how deeply they need God. He wanted God to remove it, yet instead of immediately removing the struggle, God responded differently. In fact, Many times people understand God's strength most clearly when they finally realize they cannot rely only on themselves anymore. It reminds human beings that they are fragile and limited. Sometimes pain, disappointment, fear, exhaustion, heartbreak, or failure brings people to a place where they finally realize they need God more deeply than they ever understood before. Many strong people in the Bible experienced weakness. Paul struggled deeply, yet God still used them. Their weakness did not cancel God's purpose for their lives. But the Bible constantly shows God meeting people during moments of fear, pain, confusion, failure, and weakness. My power is made perfect in weakness means God's strength often becomes most visible when human strength reaches its limit. Sometimes dependence on God grows strongest during seasons where life feels uncertain. Painful moments can soften the heart, deepen wisdom, increase compassion, and strengthen spiritual maturity in ways comfort never could. That does not mean suffering suddenly feels pleasant. Pain still hurts. Waiting still hurts. Quietly sustaining people day by day. Quietly helping broken hearts heal slowly over time. People do not have to become perfect before coming to Him. Throughout Scripture, God continuously reached people during their lowest moments and restored them with patience, love, and grace. Sometimes people believe weakness makes them unusable, but many times, weakness becomes the very place where God begins transforming a person most deeply. Because when people feel strong all the time, they often rely completely on themselves. They trust their own understanding. But weakness has a way of humbling the human heart. It reminds people how fragile life truly is. It reminds them that money cannot solve everything. Success cannot heal everything. And human strength alone cannot carry every burden life brings. Sometimes weakness is the very thing that pushes people closer to God than they have ever been before. They begin understanding compassion differently. They begin realizing how much they truly need God's presence in their lives. There are people who became wiser because they suffered, more compassionate because they struggled, more patient because life humbled them. Sometimes the strongest spiritual growth happens during seasons where a person feels emotionally exhausted, broken, uncertain, or overwhelmed. Not because God enjoys seeing people suffer, Weakness also changes the way people see others. Someone who has experienced pain often becomes more understanding toward people who are hurting. Someone who has experienced failure often becomes less judgmental. Joseph became wiser through suffering. David became more dependent on God during seasons of fear and hiding. Their weakness did not destroy God's purpose for their lives. And maybe tonight, someone listening feels weak right now. Maybe you feel mentally tired from carrying stress for too long. But weakness does not mean God has abandoned you. Sometimes the seasons that feel the darkest become the seasons where God quietly rebuilds a person from the inside. Do not assume your weakness means your life has no value. God is still able to work through tired people, hurting people, fearful people. So let the rain that is falling tonight become a reminder that not every storm was sent to destroy you. Some storms wash away fear. Some storms soften the heart. Some storms slow people down long enough to hear God more clearly. And sometimes, while the rain falls quietly outside, God is gently healing parts of your heart that nobody else can see. In Book of Psalms, Psalm 34 to 18, the Bible says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." That means God is not far away during painful seasons. He is near the tired, near the grieving, near the discouraged, near the people silently fighting battles in their mind and heart. Sometimes people think they must hide their weakness from God, but God already sees every fear, every tear, every disappointment, and every burden being carried deep inside. So while the rain continues falling softly tonight, let your mind slowly become still. Let your breathing slow down. Let your heart rest from constantly worrying about tomorrow. God is already ahead of the future you are afraid of. He is already aware of every struggle, every unanswered question, and every burden you have been carrying for too long. And even if life feels uncertain right now, even if you feel emotionally exhausted, even if you feel weak, God's grace is still holding you together, quietly one moment at a time. Sometimes healing does not happen loudly or instantly. Sometimes healing happens softly, slowly, like gentle rain falling through the night while God quietly restores peace inside the soul.